Tony, I think one of the most important things happened this week, or at least one of the most biggest cultural things happened in a while, and that is Jason Kander admitted that he's suffering from PTSD and has withdrawn from the mayor's race in Kansas City. You wrote about it. A lot of people were talking about it. In this day and age with all these things going on, he probably helped a whole lot of people, including himself, for being so vocal about all of this.
He really did, and that's what my column was about. I talked to a Marine veteran that I wrote about a couple of years ago, a guy named James Peterson, who himself fought PTSD, and similar to Jason Kander, tried to deal with it on his own for a long time and tried to deny it, and eventually his wife told him, look, you got to go in and get treatment for this, and he did, and he was really grateful. And now he's helping other veterans. He works at the Veterans Administration healthcare system here in St. Louis and helps lots of other veterans with PTSD. And one of the things he told me that was so his reaction when I called him to see if he had heard about Jason Kander, and he had, his reaction was so unique and so interesting because everybody else I talked to, you know, in the political world, people, reporters, people that I know that work for Jason Kander, everybody had the same reaction. They were just shocked. Nobody knew. It was,
right.
You know, it's one of those people that have that deal with depression and suicidal thoughts and PTSD and those things. So often it's hidden, even when you think you know people. And so everybody was shocked. And James Peterson had this amazing reaction. He was excited. He said, I love it. I'm so happy. And I'm like, explain that. And he said, he's going to help so many people because there's this soldier mentality that, you know, I didn't do enough. This other guy that I served with, this big guy that saved us all the time, that jumped on the IEDs, that you know, had a kill rate. You know,
right.
All these, you have this warrior mentality, and I was just a guy who was there, and I saw some things, and I can't possibly have this. And Jason wrote about that in a really personal way. And what James Peterson told me is that's really going to help because other soldiers, other people who served in the military who are dealing with PTSD, they'll see those words and they'll recognize themselves and start to call the VA helpline and perhaps seek help for their PTSD. So from a pure, you know, get away from the politics for a moment, just from a pure human perspective, in a country in which about 22 veterans a day are killing themselves, this was a really big deal. This is going to save some lives.
Yeah. A couple of cynical people I talked to yesterday said, oh, well, his career's done. And I was like, hold on a second. I disagree. This makes him real. It makes him honest. It shows that, you know, you can go and get help. And after Tom Schweik, the fact that he would come out and say this publicly, you know, health is the most important thing first. But I think this does nothing but help his career going forward.
I tend to agree with you, but my first reaction is it's he's going to go get his help, and we don't know if he's ever going to seek another more political career. He may part of his help process may be, you know what, politics isn't the best place for me to be right now.
Right.
And so whether or not he has a political career is secondary to him dealing with the PTSD and getting treatment and whether or not he comes back. But let's say Jason Kander says, I want to come back and serve. I want to run for office again or continue to run his national organization, Let America Vote. I believe that here's one of the interesting things about Kander, and I always try to be careful with this with politicians because, you know, I've been fooled before, but Jason Kander's one of the more sincere, real types of people that I've met in politics, and I covered him very closely as a state rep when he was pushing ethics legislation, and you saw that in the Senate race against Roy Blunt. You know, one of the interesting things about that Senate race, besides the fact that it was so close in a state that overwhelmingly voted for Trump, you didn't see a whole lot of attack ads against Kander. There was some questioning whether or not he lived in Kansas for a period when he was in the suburbs of Kansas City instead of, you know, Missouri or whatever. But there wasn't a whole lot of attack ads against Kander, and a lot of that's just because he's a pretty sincere guy. That's kind of the way he's built his, his career. And so that was part of what happened here that didn't surprise me. I think being a veteran and dealing with a problem that our nation's veterans are dealing with, and dealing with it in an open way and helping people, is going to potentially help him, not hurt him, if he comes back to politics. And I made the comparison in my column to Tom Eagleton, the former Missouri senator who was briefly a vice presidential candidate on the McGovern ticket. And that in 1972, he was knocked off because it was revealed that he had been treated for some depression and some mental issues. Well, that was different because people didn't know about it. And
right.
then it was discovered, and then all of a sudden it was a big shocking headline. Well, everybody knows about Jason Kander's treatment now, and it's a lot of things have changed in our nation since then. And I tend to think that it's not a death knell as it relates to a political career, if indeed that's what he wants to do later. He's still a very young man, and has been pretty successful.
Well, I would think paying a porn star off while your wife is having your child, if that doesn't derail you from becoming president, then a soldier coming back suffering from PTSD is probably well within the bounds. So,
it's an amazing political world we live in these days. But I just wish Jason the best, and all other soldiers that served overseas and are dealing with any of these issues. You too can have PTSD. Call the VA helpline and seek some help.
Tony Messenger, have a good weekend. We'll talk to you on Tuesday.
You too. Go Rocky.